this really is like a kind of tidal wave of so many ideas sort of thrown into this blender. Like, what was sort of the core idea that you guys had, and how did like you sort of build a story around that?
The first thing you came to, you said, let's do a 1970s road movie, and a throwback to that. And then it was the idea of, we talked about redemption, we talked about a father and daughter story.
Yeah, as opposed to, as opposed to like a romantic story between the two characters, we wanted it to be, a story about a guy who completely failed somebody, and how he was going to redeem that, and finding this sort of surrogate daughter to go on this adventure with. And we wanted it to be about a bad man doing a good thing, which was very much what it became. Milton is a bad guy. He is sent to hell because he deserves it. It's not the wrongly accused or anything like that. He deserved it, and that was important to do that and see if that could work. To see if you could really embrace this character who walks the edge of being totally evil, yet at the same time is completely compelling. Is completely trying to do an incredibly right thing and trying to make up for his past sins. That really drew us to the story and the telling of that.
Well, the thing that I was really impressed by is that it has such a gigantic scope to it. I mean, like a guy like literally driving out of hell is a big deal. Like how constrained, if at all, were you by sort of budgetary considerations in terms of doing exactly what you guys wanted to do? I know that you're so good already at making films at a certain budget that I'm wondering, did you sort of have in mind exactly what you guys knew you could do when you were sort of conceiving it, or did you have to like create it and then either dial it back or?
We talked about creating the movie like an accordion that we could expand or contract based on what our assets were financially. And within each sequence, we had to frequently do that. We'd start with we could do this, the tanker sequence being a great example of when the first scene we wrote, first version of that was massive, a total Michael Bay of action, and Milton driving and shooting shotgun at the thing, and the car splitting, the tanker truck splitting apart. And then there was no money or no time to shoot that. But what frequently happened in the movie, every time we were faced with those problems, is that we came up with the sort of the better idea of what if the accountant just steps out? What if and those what ifs really gave us a better movie and a better story, and what always came out of the character. What would the character do? What would make the character more unique? What would make the character have that special thing that you hadn't seen before?
The church is a great example, because the church used to take place outside. We knew rain was coming. We rewrote the scene for inside a church, and suddenly it takes on this full...
The ambush, and the fact that they're all singing. Like, yeah, they're singing. What are they singing? All things bright and beautiful, like beneath the Planet of the Apes.
It works.
And then this became this sort of crazy scene where you got all this congregation drawing guns on Nick and Amber. And it really... so many things came out of being very prepared and having a very open mind.
Well, Nick is an actor who, at least as a viewer, you never quite know exactly what you're going to get. I mean, certainly for better. In terms of, you go into Bad Lieutenant, you have no idea he's going to be that batshit crazy and awesome at the same time. Right. What sort of, I guess, guidance did you give him, or parameters to sort of keep contained his creativity, at least insofar as that it seemed cohesive,
With Nick, we talked a lot about sort of the directness of the character. Nick, High Plains Drifter was one of the inspiring things of the whole story and the writing of it and the creation of it. Nick had found that on his own, the fact that that he spotted that in Milton, he spotted what that was, and Eastwood's character in that is so direct in how he goes on. There's not a lot of showboating. It's very specific. And always on target, on quest, and that very, very much became part of Milton's journey. And by such, Nick and I would occasionally discuss variations, and Nick knew my background as an editor, and he's just like, well, either you'll use this or you'll use that, or you'll use both. And so we would play around a little with that, but it was always about finding the heart of a guy who seemed heartless. So that was important, finding those moments, like the little moments where he offers, Piper his jacket in the car when she wakes up after he's, kicked the hell out of Frank. Finding those bits of humanity, and then finding also the idea of a guy. One of the things we talked about is Milton doesn't totally have a plan. He knows where he wants to end up. He knows what his goal is, but like Jazz, he's going to improvise his way to get there, and he's always scoping out what he can do, what he needs to do to accomplish that. What means to an end he's going to need, and will use virtually anybody to achieve that.
Mm-hmm.
His goal is incredibly noble, and his means of getting it are incredibly selfish.
Mm-hmm.
But Nick really found that the character, to him was this sort of Edgar Allan Poe version of the Terminator. So it had, and that I think informs so much of what he did.
Mm-hmm. Is that, you mentioned High Plains Drifter, but was there a model for you guys for this? Not that you were, say, taking homage or you were inspired directly by a film, but this film has such a unique sort of feel and tone to it that it's so large, and yet there's like there are those kind of like more intimate flourishes. Was there a movie that you guys saw that was able to pull off sort of all that multi-dimensional kind of stuff that you were?
The interesting thing is there were so many movies that we loved, from the 70s that we talked about. We talked about Vanishing Point and Duel and Dirty Mary Crazy Larry and those films, Race with the Devil, obviously, and High Plains Drifter, and then things like Seven Ops, French Connection. So it's not like there's any one thing that you can pluck in terms of what you talk about, also sort of the craziness of scope and the intimacy of emotion. That was something that we used all those other things as elements of the palette of the story. But really the story itself, all those moments came out of the character, out of this need of when you were going to get information, how you were going to get information, what was the effect of on the character of divulging that information to you. Nick when Milton's at the fire barrel, and you finally learn what it was to be where he's from, and what that meant, and understanding that the version of hell in the movie isn't about being whipped by a bunch of horn-tailed demons in jackboots. It was far more intimate and far more specific to you, and far more horrific. And that was something I think we really wanted to try and find, that duality of a story that had those extremes.
Mm-hmm. Well, the most I think unique thing about this movie is that it is original idea, which is such a rare thing in Hollywood. And I'm wondering, what for you guys is the key to pulling off or being able to get people interested in an original idea? Is it making yourself known as a proven commercial director, doing other things? Is it like saying we can do this within a certain budget, or is it just having the certainty of vision or something like that can sell somebody on an original idea, as opposed to, well, this is a comic book of an adaptation of a book of a magazine of a whatever
Pamphlet.
On some levels, I think we'll see, because we certainly wrote the movie that we wanted to see. We came out of it, we had the idea, we had it planned out through Frank's death, and then we just started writing. And so it's sort of the characters in the story took us places. And I called you one night and I said, look, I just did something. I don't know if it's going to work, but here it comes. And I mean, that's how and we kept going back and forth. So I mean, that's why it feels, to me, it certainly feels a little more fresh. And so, but we do remakes, we do sequels, we do that sort of thing. But I think it's going to take a few really good original movies that make some good, decent exceptions and stuff like that for people to start going back to the original movie.
I think that was such a big component in the creation of the story, is that what people spotted was something that they hadn't really seen either before in a while or anything like that. They could recognize elements of it and recognize sort of what we were doing, but at the same time there was a freshness to it that I think Nick's comment when he read it, it's like, this is the craziest script I've ever read. DeLuca's response was, when as Todd has said, when we asked him what his script notes would be, DeLuca's response was, well, go shoot it. Let's not fuck with it. And that's a huge advantage to have people recognize that, that there was a uniqueness to it, and wanting to preserve that. Nobody wanted to overdevelop it. Nobody wanted to change it. Nobody wanted to make it something it wasn't. Nobody's like, well, that character really has got to do this. Nobody said that ever. They embraced it for what it was and said, you know what, this we understand the merit of this. We want to make it. We want this to be an original film and on our slate, and that's what that's how we got unbelievably lucky to do that.